Welcome to a very special session today on resilience and leadership, hosted by Professor Pinar Ozcan and Magnus Falk, CIO Advisor for Zoom. Magnus Falk is Zoom's CIO Advisor for EMEA and is responsible for talking to businesses, governments, and financial services about technology and security behind Zoom's video platform. With over 30 years in the industry, Magnus brings a wealth of experience to the table and is an esteemed digital and technology leader. Magnus will be in conversation with Pinar Ozcan, who is Professor of Entrepreneurship and Innovation at the Business School. She's also Director of the Oxford Future of Finance and Technology Initiative at the Business School. Pinar specializes in entrepreneurship and strategy in technology markets and is excellently placed to talk to Magnus about Zoom, the leadership, and more generally in these extraordinary times. I very much look forward to the session, and now over to you, Pinar.
Thank you so much, Viola, and thanks everyone for joining us today on a Saturday. And special thanks to Magnus. It's such a pleasure to meet you and to speak with you. Welcome to speak with us.
Thank you. It's really good to be here and great to be with you. And even better on a Saturday because it means you can really focus on it.
Exactly. Magnus, so we have a bit of time together today, and I know that we have so much to talk about, and there will be lots of questions from the audience as well. And I just want to remind everyone that please to write your questions in the Q&A, because we would like this to be as interactive as possible and lead the conversation based on the things that you'd like to find out about. But maybe just to get started, Magnus, a lot of people did not know much about Zoom before the pandemic hit, and really the pandemic has changed the visibility of Zoom quite a bit. Before we get into that part of the journey, can you tell us a little bit about the background of Zoom and then bring us to how that has changed with the pandemic?
Yes, of course. So, I mean, as most of you will know, that these stories seem like, it happened overnight. Zoom emerged, and of course, that's never the story. Behind Zoom is 10 years hard work of entrepreneurs and risk takers who saw something, capability that was needed and worked to deliver that. Eric Yuan, who's our founder and now kind of a global personality and someone who's regularly appears and whose views are sought. But he recognized that the era of video conferencing was changed, and he tried to bring his ideas to his current employer, and they said, well, we're happy making money with the existing thing that we all know doesn't make people happy. And Eric just couldn't live with that, and he then left and set up Zoom. As all of you know, as entrepreneurs and innovators, that was a really difficult thing to do. He set it up. He started it coding in 2011. A number of people joined him in that event. And you see some pictures from those early days. They were kind of, the classic, a few bits of equipment and a few people in a stuffy room. And they built Zoom, and they built it with the firm intent of making people happy to use a video conference. And actually, they came up with something completely different, something that was easy to use, reliable, cross-platform. It didn't matter whether you're on a mobile or a desktop, it just worked the same. It worked on all operating systems. And really, people saw that. And it was kind of an interesting quote when they were raising some money where the person who kind of was being asked said, look, I'm not going to invest, but when you get it launched, I'd like to buy it. It's kind of that sort of, so you go through all those sorts of frustrations where people see the potential but aren't quite ready to back you. And so by 2016, there was something that was really functional. It was beginning to take off. Businesses loved it. Business to business tool that kind of started to storm the States. The company was floated in 2019. It was already cash positive. It was making investors really happy, and all the users would just, here something just works. And then it came to EMEA and started to take off in Asia Pac, and then boom, everything changed.
Everything changed. Now, before we get to that, I think it's really interesting to think about how what we use today as Zoom could have been a Cisco product if Eric had convinced, or the managers were convinced. But it's probably better for Eric this way.
I was trying to be nice to Cisco, and I wasn't going to name check them as, you know, the people who didn't back.
Well, it's everywhere.
But now it's out the bag. You know?
Exactly. No, so what about the way that Zoom has changed the way that we lived in the pandemic? Can you tell us a little bit about that period and taking it forward?
Yeah, I think when the pandemic started to hit, I think no one quite knew exactly, you know, what was going to happen, and Eric was extremely keen to help. And you know, Zoom has always had this freemium product to allow people to use Zoom for 40 minutes, you know, unlimited one-to-one meetings, and actually give people a taste of what's possible. And also, if that's all they want, they can just continue to use it. So he decided very early on that when Wuhan was locked down, to help, and gave, you know, residents affected by the lockdown unlimited access to Zoom. You know, this then started to proliferate, and we immediately then started to help schools and gave free access, unrestricted access to schools. In the end, we were providing a service to, I think it was 125,000 schools for free, you know, across 25 countries. And so what then happened was, you know, having been a very successful business-to-business tool, we suddenly saw not only businesses implementing it in scale in weeks. I mean, the one thing about being a software as a service, it's really easy to deploy. The complexities come, you know, on the complexities of the corporate setup rather than complexities of using Zoom. But we saw consumers just pick it up and use it. And we saw use cases in education that really we hadn't conceived or had never been taught to us before. Use cases in social events. You know, I don't think people had really conceived that you would have Zoom drinks. I had a Zoom drinks last night with my father-in-law and wife, and you know, it just feels like a normal thing to be doing now. Goodness knows how it will. Those who will continue beyond the end of the pandemic, you know, only time will tell. But so people were continuing their lives, they were reinventing their businesses, and of course, the entrepreneurial spirit never dies, and it responds to this with, how can I continue to serve my customers? How can I continue to fulfill my purpose? And here's just a new situation, a new set of tools in order to do that. And so we were just amazed by the things that people were using Zoom for. And also, Pinar, to tell you the truth, for a number of months, none of our salespeople were making outbound telephone calls. Yeah.
No need.
It was no need to make outbound telephone calls. This wall of people wanting help, you know, just it was humbling, actually. You know, it's an overused word, but actually to be at the center of something where the world needs what you have at that moment in time, you know, just through happenstance, you have the right thing at the right time, and now hundreds of millions of people want it. You know, it is I think that's the definition of humbling.
In fact, and so we have one question which is very close to this topic from Chris Daniels. He's asking what would have happened if the tech of Zoom at the point of the pandemic hitting was just at the MVP stage rather than being a fully developed product? Whether this, how much of this is a serendipity versus a story of adaptation?
Yeah, I think it's a really good question, because actually I have quite a lot of observation of different things happening in different regions because of the rollout capability. But I think the thing that made Zoom successful, because it was workable, and it was workable globally at that time. If it was much earlier and it only worked in, you know, kind of San Francisco, or it only worked in the States, it wouldn't have been the global thing and had that, you know, commentary across 50 languages of people talking about Zoom, you know, in every publication, you know, in on every website, you know, with something Zoom in the link was being clicked on and driving ad revenue to, you know, correspond. It wouldn't have had that same thing if it hadn't been already, you know, a platform that just worked for people. So, you know, I think there was a moment of timing, you know, and most entrepreneurs and innovators will know that it's better to be lucky than smart on timing. And sometimes you just can't get it all together and you have to deal with what happens. But if the product had not been ready, people would not have been able to use it.
Absolutely. Although what's also interesting is that although the product was ready and being used already by many corporations and by many people, with the pandemic, both the volume of users, but also the types of users have changed. So I'm also curious about how Zoom has specifically responded to this new challenge. What did you have to do differently?
Well, I'm really glad you asked that question in the way you did, but I'm going to be, you know, absolutely upfront and say that move from businesses to consumers created quite a challenge for us. In that businesses are supported by technology departments, and they, you know, Zoom is highly configurable. It's got it's got security settings that allow a corporation to use Zoom in exactly the way it wants to use it. And it's incredibly flexible. And our defaults on the freemium thing weren't actually, we kind of came with virtually none of those settings set. And so people were just jumping on Zoom and using it, and it was making them really happy. But along with them came uninvited guests, people using the tool in a way that, you know, physically, some people might have if they were going to have a religious service, they might have someone on the door making sure that, you know, the right people were coming in. But actually, when they translated that into a virtual setting, that wasn't so obvious that they needed to do that, and we didn't force them to do that. And that that meant that we definitely had a moment where we had to listen to what was going on and respond with a 90-day focus on security and privacy to make sure that all our innovation was put into ensuring that our new users, as long as, you know, alongside our existing users, were best served by the platform. And that meant that we had to really re-engineer the platform over a few weeks in order to deliver things like the security icon right in the, you know, and make sure that all the defaults were right for you know, people who were just picking up the platform, and things were set to on. So that was a bit of then experimenting, listening to people, listening to businesses, listening to, you know, kind of what we were being told by researchers, and fine-tuning the defaults so that people had a good experience, you know, no matter how technology illiterate they were, and then could fine tune them from there. You know, they could switch stuff off if they wanted to, could switch other things on if they wanted to. So, you know, that move from 10 million daily meeting participants, which we were really proud of in December 2019, really proud, you know, it's kind of, wow, that's a big number. And then by April, we were 300 million daily meeting participants. You 30 times expansion in anyone's business is going to create some issues.
What's wonderful to see is also that we always in classes, we talk about how digital platforms have a huge advantage in that they can use the incoming data from all the interactions that are happening on the platform to keep making the platform better. And I'm sure that this was very much the case for Zoom as well.
Yeah. I think that's right. I think the thing that digital platforms, and certainly the newer entrant digital platforms, I mean, I think traditional technology or older technology versus new technology is, you know, there's definitely an advantage if you've been built very recently, because you have no legacy. You're not trying to stitch two old things together to make something new. And Zoom's API-rich technology built for the internet era, the kind of concept that you don't tie anything to compute, everything's virtualized, you know, you can use assets in a very flexible way, just meant that Zoom could innovate so incredibly quickly. You know, from the when we had the kind of 90-day focus on security and privacy, during that time we did a virtual M&A and bought a company that allowed us to do end-to-end encryption. End-to-end encryption was all live then by the end of the year. That's unbelievable, rapid innovation in this platform. And so you're right, it's great to have that data, but it's a nightmare when you have the data and can't do anything about it, being able to innovate incredibly quickly. And I had a story of working with one government where the government asked us for a feature on the Wednesday. By Friday, they had it. Now, I've never asked the product manager the question as to whether or not the feature was coming anyway, because actually I don't want to know the answer. But that, kind of, a government asks you on Wednesday and Friday it's released and they're using it, was for, I think, the person asking us the most shocking, how did you do that? And I really don't want to answer because I want it to feel like magic.
In fact, and when you compare that to some of the ways in which banks, some of the incumbent banks struggle to open banking regulations and just publishing simple APIs, it really shows how different it is when you're a digital born company.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. And yeah, I've spent a lot of time with the open banking regulation. I was a senior advisor at the Financial Conduct Authority, and I was working GDS at the time when it was just a germ of an idea from the Treasury. And having been an ex-CIO from a bank, I knew that it was possible and it would eventually come. So I've seen that journey come through, and I have always been quite amazed at how difficult it has been for banks to actually tie their old things into the new APIs. And you've got to be sympathetic because they've got a lot of other things on, but but it has been a difficult journey. I think we're there in the UK now. I think we're absolutely, so I think you're right. If you're born straight into the API environment and you're just stitching this set of APIs together with this set of APIs and you're putting your secret sauce on top, you are in a much better position. But legacy is there and everyone needs to find their way out of their legacy.
And thinking about growth, one of the questions that are coming from the audience is thinking about paying customers versus customers who are using it for free, and understanding how, especially now after the pandemic, how you're thinking about strategic growth and the balance of paying versus free users.
Yeah, I think the strategy of providing a freemium product is a really important one, because people don't know how good your thing is until they've had an opportunity to use it. And we've had all sorts of situations where we've talked to the CIO of organizations and they said, no, we're using something else. And we go back and go, why is it that 600 of your 1,000 people have actually set up an account and are using it, and here's the volumes, and they compare and contrast it against their own data and their own stuff, and they kind of realize that their organizations moved away from them, and they've moved to something else just because it's better. And so I think the freemium strategy is always there, and I think the answer of the balance between them, it kind of shifts all the time, and important to listen to our analysts, presentations at the end of the year to get the full data that's accurate for the period. But I think it's always going to be a part of a sensible platform strategy to allow people to try before they buy.
Absolutely. No, that makes sense. Now, Zoom obviously has changed the way that we function, the way that we work, the way that we live, especially during the pandemic. And thinking about that and understanding how we can continue to solve world scale problems, can you tell us a little bit about how Zoom thinks about being a global player in connecting communities, making education and wellness better? What are your thoughts from the Zoom side on that?
Well, I think that, interesting, we're a world player already, and really proud to be one. What we see is that global conferences are held on Zoom, intergovernment and interagency, and we've got some very big national and international users supporting the research community that are some fantastic clients and innovating with us in terms of what they need to do things better. So, a particular example of that in the UK Research and Innovation Agency used Zoom to link researchers with government, with universities, and also, religious groups, political parties, charities, new startups, protest movements are all major users of Zoom. So, if connecting the world to help find solutions to challenges is the mission, well, Zoom is already 100% the answer. And then, alongside that comes the responsibility of actually caring ourselves. So, Zoom has set up a cares function or a strategy, and we've donated, I think 4.3 million is the latest figure in grants to 39 organizations. So we, as a consequence of being part of this, see the needs that that we're needing to support and have a responsibility to act too.
Absolutely. And there's just so much to do in that aspect. And with the technology that we have now, that is such an interesting opportunity to see. Now, I'm going to combine two questions because I think they go really well together. You guys are thinking about transitioning to a post-pandemic world and what that will look like for you. And maybe combining that with the advantages of Zoom versus competitors and how, as we see, the competitors are trying to catch up all this time. And so what is the future for you guys in a post-pandemic world?
Some really good questions. And I think that as one looks at that post-pandemic world, as we've said earlier, the genie's out of the bottle. Two things really, and two dimensions are important here. I think the first is the employee. I think people have recognized that there are different ways to work. And all sorts of surveys, whether they're internal surveys and our clients are talking with us about them, or they're external researchers, they all say that work is going to be different. And the degree of hybrid working where you some days in an event office space and some days at home is going to become much more popular. So our employees are now going to either be in the office or at home or at another place they desire to work from. Then there's the other axis, which is your customer. Now, the same thing is happening to your customer because your customer might be in their office or at work. So we've got a couple of things happening as a direct consequence of that mean that Zoom is reacting to these pressures. The first one is that the workspace, the office space, the hybrid office space, the office space that's become more of an event space, is changing, and its ability to work with those who choose to stay remote or are working on remote on those days. That is a adaptation of work requiring adaptation of leadership styles, adaptation of processes, of real estate, and lastly, technology to support that. And we're absolutely part of those discussions and adapting our technology to help people do that. Then the second thing is business models are changing because customers are at home and they expect to be able to interact with businesses in a different way. Now, that's not going to change for dental practices. That's never going to change. Although you might be able to do a consultation over something, but that's a minor use case. But for stuff like financial planning, I would argue that you get a better meeting remotely because you're at home. Maybe you got access to all the stuff you forgot to bring to the financial planner's office, or you can access your material. I argue that there are many business types that work better when they can be served well over video. In any event, most businesses will have to respond because their customers might be at home that day. And so we've got this two-way push, which means that Zoom's business continues to, and was always brilliant for supporting both of these, but it's now become a major strategic intent for the board. How is our new work style going to work? How do we make sure our conference rooms are set up in such a way that if someone's at home or in the conference room, they're getting the same experience and they feel part of the same team, and we can collaborate across those multiple environments? How do we do that? How do we set our process, how do we get our technology right? And Zoom is helping tens of thousands of businesses do that, if not hundreds of thousands of businesses. And then there's the, how do we integrate Zoom into our business, or how do we make sure that our business now works remotely? Oh, our customers expect video. Oh, they expect high quality video. Oh, they also expect that it's a video that they can use. And quite frankly, most people can use Zoom. I'd argue that many of the other tools haven't quite got the same footprint. And so, well, it's better to use something that our customers are already familiar with, and continues to keep them happy. And so we can use that as the video element of our business process. Or if actually the meeting is the key thing, let's put our business process into the body of the meeting with the shortly to be announced or released Zoom apps functionality, so you can make it a better meeting. So I think that what we've got now is a situation where business has changed, that workplace has changed, video's at the heart of it. Yes, Zoom is kind of in the middle of this because people see it as the platform that works, the most innovative of the platforms, and the one to, that actually helps people kind of make a difference. And of course, the competitive genie is out of the bottle. The others have woken up to the fact that what they provided before was woeful. And I mean, if anyone has been on old-fashioned video conference and then goes on to Zoom, there's a kind of relief moment. And so yes, there's going to be a competitive situation, which is exactly what business is about. And it's great to have woken people up. Zoom continues to have an innovative advantage. We can move quickly. We focus on what we do. We don't have a million other things that we do. And we're really listening to the customers and adapting our platform. So for example, in financial services, we listened to them and said, well, we love the ability to record, but we absolutely need to have archiving that, for our regulated users, we guarantee that the record. So we've implemented archiving. An archive bot joins the meeting, takes the archive, and guarantees that there is a recording. And by the way, the user can still record if they want to for their own purposes, but the organization has their record. So long answer, Pinar, and but I could have talked for another 40 minutes on that.
Me too. That's so close to my heart. And one of the interesting things to think about Zoom versus competitors is obviously some of the competitors, like the Microsofts and the Googles of the world, they are so integrated into either the consumers' lives, if you take the case of Google, or Microsoft, if you think about corporations. And technologically, you guys have an advantage, but in terms of compatibility with other products that are being in use, they might have a bit of advantage too. So yeah. How are you guys thinking about that for your future?
Well, I'm really glad you asked that question, because I should have really included that in my previous answer. So thanks for spotting the deficiency. But to answer the question is that I don't see it as an either or. I mean, we expect that that people are going to have to interact with people who use other platforms. And we integrate fully into both Microsoft Teams environment, Office 365, and also into Google. You can initiate Zoom meetings from the heart of Google. You can initiate Zoom meetings from the heart of a Teams client. So it's all fully integratable. I think we just believe in much more of a best of breed environment, where we set out to integrate and be integratable in a without a kind of, oh, but we own so many things that these must be better. We're already integrated into over 1,000 commercial applications that uses Zoom. From Slack, you can go /Zoom in a channel and start a Zoom meeting, for example. And so that whole, we play nice with our competitors. From a Zoom room, you can join natively a Teams meeting. So we're trying to keep our users happy by allowing them to have a best of breed world. And many of our customers have a dual strategy, that they might use one thing for inside, but sure as hell they use Zoom to interact with their customers, because that keeps their customers happy.
Exactly. As long as the technological advantage continues, in a sense, there's less to worry about. Absolutely. Now, we have a very interesting question. This is something that we as instructors experience as well, the issue of hybrid working or hybrid teaching.
Yes.
So having people in front of you or physically together and some of them online. And that, at least personally, I find that to be one of the hardest situations to work with. Can you tell us a little bit about what you guys are doing in that space?
Hybrid teaching and you know, hybrid work styles is definitely different. And I think we've in the past always been in a situation where you're the remote one in a meeting and you're being completely ignored, and it's been not a great situation. So you kind of go, oh, I won't do that again. But I think today it is possible to have good hybrid working. And I think there's a bit of making sure that the practices you use are supportive of hybrid, but there's also, if you get the technology wrong, it will stand in your way. So I think there's a kind of, if you're going to have hybrid students with, you know, the main body of students, you need to have a screen showing the hybrid students who are joining the meeting, so that, you know, the teacher can see the screen of the hybrid and the, you know, the people who are joining the meeting. I think that's a really important one. I think to have a camera that actually tracks the movement of the teacher, so you don't have to stand in a particular place. And these things are, you know, readily, I've got a Zoom room downstairs where the camera, you know, follows me as I walk around. You know, these things are there and usable. I think good microphone technology, so that, you know, the teachers being picked up wherever they go. And I think then you start getting into the, well, how do you integrate the chat channel with the questions from people in the room? And then there are multiple answers to that. And what I do see here is that institutions are really embracing this, and they are learning lessons as quick as we can talk about it. And we ingest those lessons, and then we try and replay them back to people. So we've had a couple of sessions where we've done, you know, lectures to about 50,000 teachers on how to do these types of things. And I think this is going to evolve. I think people are going to get better and better. But the answer is not just, you know, one bit of technology. I think there is, you know, you have to get the combination of teacher confidence, screens in the right places, and well-positioned cameras. I think that's at the core of the answer. But I've not done this personally. I've held a lot of hybrid meetings, but hybrid teaching is something that I think is just going to get better and better as people get more experience with it. Pinar, did I miss something in that?
No, absolutely. That's great. And in fact, I think that your answer was spot on. It's not an easy problem to solve. And technology alone is not the answer. Like, there needs to be, for example, I walk around a lot when I teach. Like, I'm here and there. That a camera cannot follow me. How is that going to work?
Oh yeah. Well, a camera can follow you. You just need to have a camera that follows you.
Busy, yes.
Yeah. I mean, and the thing is, you walking out of the shot's not going to help anyone.
Yes.
But actually, if it's just tracking you as you're walking around, you know. We might make the virtual participants feel a little seasick,
Exactly.
but it's certainly possible today.
Yeah, absolutely. We have a great question from Oscar Vasilik about younger generations. So we talked about teaching, in different spaces and the work environment. How is Zoom engaging with younger generations in their free time? We know that they spend a lot of time on things like TikTok and Snapchat. How is Zoom playing out in their lives?
Well, I think that most of the younger generation, and you kind of adapt to things so much quicker than anyone else, and they all have experiences of Zoom, through classroom teaching and also the kind of events that they've organized for themselves. But I have to say, I think children and younger people are just dying to meet in person, and I don't think that Zoom should have any agenda to stop them doing that. and we are always there for them as a platform to help them when they can't do the best option. And sometimes then Zoom is the best option for the situation they're in. And I think they'll be wise enough to use Zoom where it fits into their lives.
Yeah. One of my favorite examples from a middle school student is the way that they changed their name to Reconnecting and had a black screen and then basically ignored their teacher.
Oh, well, I think that you know, one of the reasons that we had to introduce the security shield and, you know, all the features is you know, kind of general school naughtiness of renaming yourself in a lesson to be a rude word. I mean, I'd have done that when I was a kid. Absolutely. And so, you know, allowing the teacher, you know, to prevent people renaming themselves from their login name, you know, I think was a really nice feature. But also, you know, something that's exactly the sort of thing that we were taught by it happening, because in a corporate environment, you cannot imagine that someone's going to rename themselves to be a naughty word in a corporate environment. You know, it just wouldn't happen. You know, well, it might, but everyone would go, you know, you put yourself back. You know?
Absolutely. So in a sense, that really shows how adaptable you had to be in a very short time. Yeah. Now, I want to ask about leadership during the time of the pandemic and afterwards. And I know that you guys have had many chats with your business customers and thinking about their needs. Can you tell us a little bit about what they're saying about how their leadership style had to adjust to the environment?
Yeah, I think, you know, I think clients have recognized that virtual leadership is slightly different. I think you know, it comes with, you probably have to be even clearer of your purpose, you know, and I think probably accentuate some of the things that you can get away with by having charisma. You know, people will follow someone with charisma, but charisma is probably less easy to put across over you know, this sort of device, and so I think you know, people are telling us that it works really well in terms of collaboration and task management and projects and maybe agile stand-ups. What's less easy is serendipitous moments. You know, the drop-ins and you know, all sorts of innovations have happened around the facilitation of serendipitous moments to fill in that gap. I would argue that that gap's going to be filled in the hybrid space by the office being the event space. You know, I don't think serendipity is ever totally going to be filled by video, but that's my own personal view. But you know, people have innovated because they couldn't get to the event space that is the office, and you know, it played a second best. I think there's you know, deliberate touch basing. You know, we kind of do one-to-ones in the office, and sometimes you kind of didn't do the one-to-one because you just see someone so many times that you kind of know that you can see how they're feeling. I think that, you know, that much more deliberate one-to-ones. And then people say, well, does that mean that leaders are hassling their people? And I don't think, if you're a leader and you're talking with people who are meant to follow you, you can really give them too much face time, you know. So I don't think that's hassling. And I think there's also, how do you create environments where people learn through osmosis? And you know, we've seen lots of people, you know, experiment there, you know, just inviting junior people to meetings they probably wouldn't have gone to otherwise. The creation of always on rooms so that people are doing their work, but they're in a room with the people. You know, it's a bit like being together and you're just seeing each other, but you're just kind of listening it in the background. And if there's something private or you need to join another meeting, you just put it on, you know, on hold. And so I think there are devices that people have used, but leadership is pervasive across all these tools. I mean, you know, leadership over email is, you know, is a kind of much more different thing. Leadership across geographies, but it all comes back to be a leader, you need to lead with a purpose and lead with care so that people want to follow you.
Exactly. Yeah, I think that leading with care through Zoom is absolutely possible, and it's one of the advantages the platform, of the technology. Just out of curiosity, were there some product developments and ideas that you turned down for ethical reasons or for other reasons that you just rejected?
Yeah, there was an interesting debate back in April last year about attention tracking. So this was a feature that had been implemented through, those who used it in the education space, of wanting to be able to get reports as to the people were, listening to the session. And then the feedback came through that was a bit creepy to have attention tracking, in non-teaching environments was probably something that, made people feel uncomfortable. So we switched it off. But you can understand where it came from, understand why it's very useful. But if as soon as it's generally available in a platform and people start using it in a creepy way, you've got to draw a line somewhere and say, no, we can't have a platform that doesn't make people happy. And so that was a really interesting debate.
Absolutely. No, I can imagine that. I often think about what type of features some of your users might want, but the other side of the users might absolutely hate that, right? So that's kind of an interesting dilemma to have.
Yeah, the other one was being able to mute people without or unmute them without asking. That was also another one of, no, absolutely, you shouldn't have someone who's running the meeting be able to do something to your microphone without you saying yes or no to it. Because, and of course then, so when we were, Parliament found that really difficult because they wanted to unmute people who weren't in the debate or mute people that weren't in the debate and then unmute them. And then they had a situation where a blind MP found it difficult to give permission to unmute him. So it was, you get into then the real edge cases around your intent to try and find the right balance.
Absolutely. So we are coming to the end of our conversation, but what I would love to do is, because among our audience, among our alumni, there's so many people who are leaders that are leading their teams and their organizations in the digital space now, and particularly using Zoom. So I'm interested in the pieces of advice that you might give them in being a leader in the digital space.
Yeah, thank you very much indeed. I mean, I've led in many different constructs. I've been a military leader. I've led small projects. I've led very large parts of a bank. I've tried to lead in government, and I've tried to lead through influence. And I think through all that, the thing that's come clear to me is, if you set out to be a leader, make sure you're leading with a purpose that you care about. Because if you try and do anything that's not authentic, then people see it and won't follow. And so that's the kind of top level advice. The kind of day-to-day advice is, don't do anything that would disappoint your mum. and the third is,
I have a perfectionist mom. I'm not sure how that's going to work.
But thirdly, you will make mistakes. Accept that you're not going to be perfect and try and use them to learn the lessons for the future. So those are the three thoughts that came to me when you mentioned you might be asking that question. But it's leadership and taking advice from someone and kind of implementing it yourself is one of those. I'm glad I'm not teaching it, because though I think it can be learned, I think it's learned more through experience of whether people follow you or not than it is from actually listening.
Now we're coming to the end of our time together. I could have talked for hours, and hopefully we'll get more chances to talk, Magnus. This was an absolute pleasure, and thank you to our audience for all the questions and for making it more interactive for us. And thank you for our organizers, the Alumni Association. I want to give the word back. I believe it's Viola who's going to come back.
I just wanted to thank both of you for the fabulous conversation. And just like yourself, Pinar mentioned, I would have happily sit here and listen to you for the entire afternoon. I do hope that, Magnus, we will see you again at some point at the business school, because it would be great to have that conversation maybe in a couple of years' time to see.
I'd love to come back. I'd love to do it in person, and I'd love to be able to see you all. So thank you so much for having me.
Next time
Thank
we
you
want
so
to
much.
see your Zoom room too.
Oh yes, yeah. I'm sorry about that. Yeah,
Exactly.
I was going to demonstrate a Zoom room, but it was a bit fiddly to join that way, so we decided against it.
Sounds great. Next time then.
Thank you very much, Magnus, and thank you very
Magnus.
much, Pinar, for leading the session. Have a lovely rest of the
Take
day.
care.